Well, welcome everyone. It's another week of the creating and monitoring functional landscapes. Um, I was just talking to people, and I feel like I need to put in some more on the financials, but also some more about that, monitoring the functional landscape. So, creating and monitoring, I see that as the bedrock. If you can take any land anywhere and make it into high landscape function, so 100% ground cover, 20% basal area of the perennial grasses, decomposing litter in between those, that once you've got that skill, you can manage any land. Um, and you can start to think about, well, what am I going to do? How do I make money out of this? How do I do this low cost, low risk profit so that you skip over dry periods? There's sort of here, and I know Rob down in northwest Tassie and stuff. We're getting these sort of weeks on end of no rain, whereas we're used to sort of a bit more consistency. So there's quite a few areas that you get, you know, worse than, or at least a month of into growing season drought, and you've got to be able to skip over all of those things. Otherwise, it's sort of not. It's high risk and not very enjoyable. So I'll kick into it. Just acknowledgement of where I am here. So just down here on the lakes, grab pointer. So just down here on the lakes, down here between Sale and Bairnsdale, and the roulettes who train out of the Sale airport fly over all the time. And I'm not sure whether I've said it, but Jared said you'll get sick of it. Whereas we thought it was fantastic the first sort of 6 months of free air shows, and now you don't even look up. You just go, oh, do you have to? Um, I still think this is sort of as good a definition of regenerative agriculture or any of that sort of low cost, low risk, improving the environment, the land. The land's the basis of everything. That's why people and money are nested within that increasing biodiversity. Um, Current agriculture is still sort of depleting biodiversity and sort of starting to increase the rate. And the rate of soil loss is just through the roof. There was a good podcast webinar by Gabe Brown and Alan Williams on just how much they're seeing. So areas that are flooding are also blowing. So as you know, most erosion's waterborne, not windborne. Um, and yeah, so I'll try and remember to put the link in for the Gabe Brown, Alan Williams as well. So I still think that's pretty sound. Current agriculture's got a declining terms of trade problem. Um, it, it almost appears like we might break out of the net farm income, the green, out of 10 billion. I just can't imagine that. Like I almost feel like the way it's okay, yeah, I'll get back to that. Um uh yeah, I just feel like the system controls back to 10 billion, but it'd be nice if it did break out. But we've got to sort of narrow this gap, and this gap is created by inputs and risk. So you've got to remember we've got to close this gap. No, don't look at the gross on your place. Look at the profit. How much are you going to keep at bank? So how do you keep money at bank? Um, Landscape functions a revelation. Um, People are just stunned by it. I'm on one of Johan Zeitsman's WhatsApp groups, and I posted the manual, the landscape function manual, and they all really liked it and thought it was great stuff because they couldn't understand why I didn't like what they were doing. The increasing stocking rate, they're getting more perennials, but they've got no litter. Um, and the basal covers sort of, that 10% basal cover, whereas I think it needs to be like a minimum of 20%. So they've got erosion, they've got less than optimal water infiltration and less than optimal nutrient cycling. And the reason they do that is because in those tropical and subtropical areas they're working in, the grasses, they call them low octane. They come back to keep them fresh, which we used to do the same thing over in. I'll just check there's not someone for the weapon. Yeah, over in southwest Victoria. So that was always, you've got to keep them fresh, stop them going rank and feral. Yeah, so I still think that's, like it's so sound. If you manage for landscape function, learn how to do it with safe to fail trials, it all makes sense. And you've got to just be careful because all of a sudden you've got a different set of eyes than the other farmers and land managers you're talking to. So, oh, I was going to ask before I got to this slide, I didn't look. We need to know the definition of perennial grass recovery. And I'm a real stickler for, Alan Savory used to drive me crazy about sort of saying not rest, it's recovery. So you can rest something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's recovered. So we need to know we must have recovery. So the definition I use is when it looks like an ungrazed plant, so all its tips are nice, so there's no chewed off tips. All of those are now down in the litter, down in here, and contains fresh yellow litter since the last. Just a bit of feedback from someone. Yeah, so fresh yellow litter. It's got to be fresh. It can't be that oxidized grey colour from the previous year. It's got to be from the previous grazing. You've regrown that fresh yellow litter, and that leaf emergence rate. It's mainly driven by temperature and soil moisture. So not fertilizer. Can you mute Matthew?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
I was trying to attract Celia's attention, but she's not. Thank you. Yeah, so leaf emergence, the rate that those new leaves emerge is driven by temperature and soil moisture. And there is a bit of an impact on previous management because how much energy reserves are in the crowns of the perennial grasses. So you need to monitor. You can't use average figures and things like that. You've actually got to go out into the paddock and check, does it look like an ungrazed plant and contains fresh yellow litter? I try and go well past what people believe because you've got to have enough litter to cover the ground. The soil will keep chewing away. All the life in the soil will keep chewing away at the litter and you'll get a floating litter. And you need to see that you've grown enough litter and you push it down and then it's in contact with the soil, then it'll decompose. If it's floating, it can be a bit of a problem for water infiltration and a harbour for grubs and insects and stuff. So it's got to be cycling. And once it starts cycling, everything starts to come good. So I'll come up to that a bit further. But yeah, looks like an ungrazed plant and contains fresh yellow litter. The ungrazed plant is Alan Savory's definition, and I've added and contains fresh yellow litter. And because it doesn't increase, you can actually have the plant that doesn't have any leaves. So a lot of dairy grazing's trying to do, this is perennial ryegrass that maintains 3 growing leaves. And they're trying not to have any leaves die because they say that was food that was wasted for the cow. But if you don't do that, then you're responsible for erosion, nutrient cycling, water infiltration, and every dairy I go to that's trying to do the 2.5, 3 leaf ryegrass grazing or equivalent with other grasses, they have to always put lots of fertilizer on. They're draining it all the time. They're doing all these things, which is a consequence of not having recovered grasses. So have I hammered that enough? Everyone happy? So yeah, so different plants have different perennial grasses have different amount of actively growing leaves, but you don't need to know all that. You can learn it if you want. What you need to know is, has it produced a lot of litter? So and I was just looking, that's a photo I've been using for a while. I'm still in shorts, so most of the time. So then we know that it's this combination. So recovery is required to increase the soil surface and to get the function that we need. And we know we do all that work of cycling the carbon, promoting germination by recovery, stock density, and plant utilization. And Jordan's got some fantastic photos up further demonstrating just the power of recovery. But then when you do go through, you've got to really use it well. You'll end up with a carbon nitrogen ratio out of whack and stuff like that. And I've got a link to a woman up further on YouTube, and it's just fantastic. It's like as if she's been coming to the webinars. So it's really good. She's got safe to fail trials. She's doing sort of ultra high stock density and mucking around with recovery and things like that. At the end of it, she says she thinks it's too much work. So I think she should wait and see what the outcome is to see whether it is or not. So I'm saying this, and I don't know anyone in the world that says this, that you can have 100% ground cover. If you don't have 100% ground cover, if someone's saying they're regenerative and you can see the soil, you know that they're not. You know that they're not. And it's really hard. What do you say? So you can imagine most of the farms I go to don't have 100% ground cover. So and I've got that in the definition sort of regenerative. And these figures are sort of what I say is the minimum of what you need to be saying that you're regenerative. And gee, it upsets people. It's like as if they wanted to be regenerative because they've changed their management, even though the management doesn't necessarily improve. I realise that I used to think that all forms of rotational grazing were good till I did a project on the grassy box woodlands, communities in landscapes it was, with Sydney Uni, Greening Australia and all that crew, DPI New South Wales, CSIRO. There were so many groups and that we just couldn't get anything done because no one could decide who was in charge. But I won't go in. I didn't want to waste taxpayer money. But then when they let me out and let me speak, they go, "Hey, you're pretty good at this sort of stuff." But yeah, what we found was that the low stock density set stocking, sympathetic set stocking, was better than the short recovery rotational grazing. So we measured it, like all the landscape function, biodiversity, soil health, birds, insects, the whole shooting match, and the number of perennial grass species, native grass species and things like that. So it was in central, west, and southern, highlands sort of area on that grassy box woodland, and the set stocking at low stock density was better for all those parameters than the short recovery, doubled the stocking rate, trying to do some sort of, cell grazing, planned grazing. And I don't know, no one sort of that hasn't done that work, because it was a bit of a whack between the eyes that just because you're moving the animals, it's actually worse. So the majority of dairies, be careful, there's a couple of dairy farms on. Well, no, I can't see Rob. Is he still on can't see. Yeah, but like that's like saying, well, dairies are regenerative, and like the majority of dairies are that far from regenerative that it's a joke sort of thing. So they're losing sort of 14 tons per hectare of topsoil and per annum, like a re-sowing, using nitrogen fertilizer. This is the first time that we've gone through this area on Wattle Park with older calves. Yeah, I'll see if I can find it, Jordan. And I forgot what the other question is. God, I'm hopeless. I've had a big day at Paddy's, 2 jumpers. So so this is the first time with older calves. Someone said to me yesterday, "Oh, I'd never thought that, because you can't make them work too hard when they got new calves on them, especially in this sort of rushes and things like that." So I just did this yesterday morning.
Just can't speak with the cold. Just moved them onto this really deep rushes area. It's more grass through it, but they still think it's some kind of sick joke. No one's eating. A few skinny binnies. I'll keep them moving.
So what I'm trying to do is, the rushes are there because it's anaerobic. I'm trying to get enough stock density to germinate the perennial grass seed bank in the soil. So then those fibrous rooted perennial grasses will aerate the soil and create the conditions that don't favour the rushes. So you're not trying to eat the rushes, you're trying to germinate grasses. The problem is never too much weed. The problem is always not enough grass, especially with rushes or cape weed or thistles or whatever. Focus on more grass. The woodies are harder. The woodies, like you've sort of got to be really onto it if you've got a problem with woody plants germinating and establishing. And you've got to work out, well, how do I get the stock density that the grasses will tend to control the woody weed ingress, also known as trees. So you just need to make sure that you're trying to always more grass, not sort of stick to I'm going to kill the weed. You're just going to replace it by growing something that you do want that's productive. So that's sort of, I do a lot of that sort of stuff.
This is actually getting more grass through it. It's also with a kangaroos camp. So, but this is getting, like, it's only fog, but it's getting more plants in through, and it'll start to open it up. I don't know whether that'll come out or not, but just sort of the mob of kangaroos that are up near the house. So this is sort of only a fraction. So what would there be? 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, probably 50 or so, 50 or 60 kangaroos. And that's Jared's house, and the cattle yard's just up there. So lots and lots of young ones. And it looks like we might get a shower of rain. It's all good.
So I'll skip along, but like the kangaroos live in the rushes, so it's hard to do that. I need to put up a cage or something and just do a trial. So on what's going on. Luke, your questions. I don't care what they are, as long as they're high successional perennials. So really, LFA doesn't say anything about species or diversity. It just says that if you want it to be stable, infiltrate water, cycle nutrients. So things like African lovegrass, or serrated tussock, which can be quite tricky. I find African lovegrass hard, serrated tussock pretty easy. As long as they've got basal area and they're perennial grass, they'll actually increase those things. So you really got to, you want it to be palatable and a higher successional than a lot of those perennial grass weeds, your Chilean needle, your African love grass, and your serrated tussock. And the only way you can outcompete them with a higher successional perennial grass appears to be if you've got like African love grass as a summer grower, a C4 grass, you've got to start growing C4 grasses. So we've got African love grass down in Tassie, down at Druthi Point. It was serrated tussock, and you could crowd it out with cocksfoot. So it's that sort of type thing with the grasses. So the new toys turned up. This is a fence lifter, and I'm still training them, which is a bit frustrating at the moment. I've got some cows that won't duck under the water. They didn't come to the training. So this is just a little solar powered unit. You lower it down, you hook this little hook through the electric tape. When it goes off on the timer, it just raises up and lifts the fence, and they're supposed to walk under it. I'll just keep going. Being a bit slow. I all thought that was a bit weird the first couple of times. So I'm down to about the last two that won't come under it. I'll just go to the next one. That's one of my cows that I've had for a long time. So she just walked under, and then because she walked under, this other cow of mine, the Angus cows, she's done this a million times, goes, oh, well. So she's sort of still leading everyone under. And it's quite weird that the fence lifted tonight, and they were looking for her. Like, where are you to go first? Which I thought was really strange. So they haven't all got going yet on this. The first time I tried to video it, I stood at the end, and they all stood and looked at me, whereas I stood in the middle and then just walked back, which tended to suck them all through. But it's just frustrating. Those last two or three can be really sort of get under your skin. I'll just picking up the messages. Yeah. It's wrong tab. Is that thing for the benefit? Is that? Oh no, the alerts them. Yeah, so they actually react to the beeping. So, which is really good, Lawrence. They get much quicker. So just a quick one. I need to get to things. I'm wandering a bit. This is Neil from the Tuesday night group, and the neighbours are all spreading chicken manure, and he wondered what I'd say. So I sort of tried to step through it in a methodical way. So we know what we want. We want increasing biodiversity, landscape function, low cost, low risk profit. We're not focusing on production and well-being scores. So we know that, from that you can sort of, does it increase landscape function? Does it lower my expenses and debt? Does it reduce fossil fuel use and lower inputs? Does it increase my family and community well-being? Because Neil and Penny were sort of complaining about the smell sort of thing. So, and then they were asking about, would it be that smelly if it was composted? So the first thing I go to, this is work done by Professor Stuart Hill. He was at New South Wales, University of New South Wales, I think. He came up with this idea that there's different levels of change, and I think I've mentioned it, but the first one we go for is to make things more efficient. The second one is, can we replace an expensive or toxic input or whatever with a more benign input? And then, or can we redesign? So I tried to do this with nitrogen, and also, nitrogen's a really good one. So efficiency would be putting a coating on the urea so it doesn't volatilize, doesn't go up into space as quick. Substitution would be using chicken manure for me. So you're not using urea, you're using a more natural product, even though how natural, I'd argue, is a bit weird, because we should only be occasionally eating chicken, not flat out like we are. It should be a Christmas treat and things like that, like when I was a boy. And it just uses more, to grow a kilo of chicken uses more human edible feed than what, on average, worldwide, looking at it, uses more human edible feed, grains, than what meat does, because we can't eat grass and and stubbles and all that sort of stuff. So if you average it around the world, chicken's eating too much. So we need to get off get off pig and chook, I say. So substitution. So this is the level of change that the chicken manure redesign is increasing with growing perennial grass, is increasing landscape function, so that you bypass all this nitrogen stuff, because you're actually growing more necromass and more insects and life in the soil, which then goes directly into the plants if you've got enough fungal activity. So this is a complete redesign. If you wanted to check if a soil scientist knew what they were talking about, Magali Wright, for those down south, taught me this. So, and Dr. Magali Wright, that ask them, do they think you need to mineralize, or or say, oh look, I'm trying to bypass mineralization of the nitrogen. The majority of soil scientists say you can't do that, and if they say that, they don't know what they're talking about. And Magali worked out a lot of this sort of stuff because she was a orchid head. I think it was an orchid person, not awkward, orchid. She loved orchids, so that she and she worked it out because the orchids don't like free nitrogen, nitrate, and ammonium running around the soil. So this one here is coating on the urea. This one's chicken manure. So we know that, we've got that sort of stuff. We also know that if you add nitrogen, you end up with the ammonium and nitrate in the soil, and nitrate is incredibly toxic and leaks. It doesn't bind very well. It doesn't play very nice. It ends up in the waterways. In America, they get in their wells and things, they get too much nitrate, and they get things like blue baby syndrome, because it inhibits oxygen absorption. So you want to get out of there, because if you have too much of these, this pathway doesn't work very well. The organic nitrogen, most of that goes straight into the plants that way, and it bypasses all the life in the soil and the organic nitrogen. So if you put that into the soil, you shut this end down. So it's sort of, the plants go, well, I'm not going to feed all my mycorrhizal fungi and life in the soil, because I'm getting fed anyway. So it's a bit more like fast food than high nutrient density food, and it's toxic leaking and stuff like that. It acidifies the soil. It burns carbon out of the soil. It's it just does so many bad things. If we could change one thing, we would make it hard for people to afford nitrogen, or for people to make it. They're talking about the woman that's really good on the not the nano computing. What is it I'm looking for? The it's on the radio today. She's talking about those super fast computers and designing a better way of making nitrogen fertilizer. And I wanted to write to her and say, can't you design a way out of it using your supercomputer? Yeah, so they do to an extent. All plants do to an extent, Jordan. So the question is, to what degree do perennial grasses fix soil organic nitrogen? So, but what we're doing is we're putting that liquid carbon pathway, which feeds the life in the soil, which then becomes the organic nitrogen from the amino acids in the life. So it's more that we're creating conditions for life, that we're actually then creating the organic nitrogen from that. And the same with the decomposing litter. It feeds that carbon cycle. It's the way, so the way sunlight gets into the soil is through the decomposing litter, that's a short-lived, through the liquid carbon pathway, and then the sloughing of roots. And it's all that food, water, and shelter that you provide by having high landscape function that grows this pool of microorganisms and fauna in the soil. And then it's the amino acids in them that add to this highly labile and organic nitrogen. So the pathway is great. The thing to do is to focus more on growing that, not trying to add it that way. So it's completely different. So, and I've been trying to say the third way. I've been talking about this since the early 2000s. And it just doesn't seem to catch on. The universities are still pumping the whole idea of you've got to mineralize the nitrogen. So you've got to take the short circuit. So what we're trying to create is these conditions, not much ammonium, not much nitrate, big pools of this, highly functioning, lots of mycorrhizal fungi, so ectos for trees, endomycorrhizae for grasses, but it really doesn't matter. What we've found is that all the plants do this sort of stuff. So, and we know that when they started, it was in the pine forests in, that they found this, and they did that sort of thing. So the plants, irrespective of their different types of root fungal associations, bypass nitrogen mineralization. So we just need to know, so they did in the boreal forests and things like that first, and then they found that the grasses and the shrubs and everything did as well. Here we go. Sorry, was that all right? Did I do that all right? I was rushing because I felt like I was taking up too much time. Was that of interest? Good. So it's a hard place to argue. Oh, good. Yeah. I don't know, Spiky. I was thinking, around that roadkill or dead animals. It's always bright green around the dung usually, and things like that, unless it's left to recover long enough. I'll have to think about that. But yeah, it's probably the decomposition and the amino acids coming out of the life in the roadkill. So Jordan, your photo, I really like this photo. I would have said that looks like the ocean in the background. So it's a lovely photo. So, and I just thought this was great. So Kikuyu pasture, I've struggled to work out which is the top half of the section. So is it that way or is it that way that you were talking about?
So, oh yeah, you can't really quite see in the photo, but the paddock sort of goes downhill. So when I meant the top half, I meant the section that they're not on, the green section that you can't see them on.
This one or this one?
The top sections, yeah, the green section that they're not on at the moment. So where you can see where they've eaten.
Yeah.
Coming down, and that next
on here.
section, yeah, I gave them that whole area.
So they had all of that to graze, but they didn't want this.
I gave them that whole area because they needed a big feed in the afternoon, and they just went straight down to the bottom section. And I came down in the morning to move fences again, and there was still that top section was still green. So I left him for a bit longer to make him eat that down, but they just didn't. Yeah.
Oh. There's this whole thing too about balancing, how much grass they need and trying to get them to stay on trample things, and the whole what I was trying to say with the rushes and stuff, and you've got to have them at the right stage of lactation and so you've got to take the advantage when you can. So yeah, I think it looks great. So I like this utilization. Did that empty them out too much? Did it? When you said they needed a big feed overnight?
I think it was just a case of I can't remember what I was doing, but I wasn't there I think I had to move them. It was something about me being out and having to give them extra food. Just a lifestyle thing more than anything.
I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
But yeah, so that
lifestyle,
top
I guess.
section was in a different paddock until about 4 months ago.
And that's what the orange line is it?
Yeah, that's sort of separate. You can't really see it in the photo, but that's sort of separating where that was where the old paddock was.
From that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. I really like it. So I was trying to work out which bit they hadn't eaten, sort of. And this is fantastic. So this photo and just the description's great. So the 4 months ago, and now it's sort of you can't tell where the laneway was. So I just think that's fantastic, that sort of stuff. The power of just recovery. So, but you could still feel that it was harder underground or shallower soil. So. Yeah, exactly. It's always when you first start these things, you've really got to just take photos. You go, oh, that's not worth taking a photo. You just got to go clicky, clicky, I found. We didn't take enough photos here, and we were too busy fencing and things like that. So, but yeah, it's starting to shift. So excellent. And then Rob, I had your photos of your safe to fail trial. So that's starting to get some grasses maturing there, and it looks like that'll go really quickly to perennial grass. Is Rob still on? I can't see.
Do you have any hot water bottles,
yeah.
Meg, or they'd have a hot water electric?
There.
Yeah,
Did you want a hot water bottle,
Does that bed have
Celia?
a blanket?
You might need to mute yourself.
Hang on, I've been
Celia.
talked to.
There you go.
Sorry.
I was worried about the hot water bottles. Yeah. So it's fenced
I'm
off,
cold.
ready to go. No, keeps coming back. So this is the trial area that we had the map for. Got a bit confused having been there. I thought that was another paddock and we were on this side and there was a gateway here. So
I decided to shift it to the paddock to the paddock before the one that we were originally going to do it in. So I've just got to put some gateways in it and put the water trough in there.
Fantastic. Yeah, but like when I look at that with the right balance of recovery and things like that, you need to keep taking those photos. I just wish I had taken more because but it should be pretty stark that this has still got cape weed in it and this doesn't have any cape weed. And it's that difference that people really gets them excited. So, well, not everyone gets excited. And I used to say it was it's just some people find that Yeah, because I really liked it. I found that this is great because everything's under my control. But now, hot water bottle conditions. The Now I just love it, but I find some people, they find out that they're creating the cakeweed themselves through their management, and they hate that knowledge. They almost find, there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, and people will take out their safe to fail trials. So it'll be great to see the reaction as you do it, Rob, on how it goes and all that sort of stuff, because I think it'll highlight that all these other issues sort of are created by the combination of recovery, stock density, and utilisation.
Yeah,
and then a photo. You go, sorry.
Yeah, I've also fenced off the same sized area, just with a reel, just to see what it looks like without the high density as well. So
fantastic.
I'm gonna have 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months with just normal low density, just to compare them.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. So, is it worthwhile going up in that density, because it'll mean more work shifting cows and doing all that sort of stuff. So, I think it's great. So, cows looked well. I did have a good look at the cows. So, and it's green, but it'll be interesting just to see, because typically a drier winter will grow more grass down your way, wouldn't it? So.
Yeah, the cows have been getting a lot of feed, but their dung scores are really low at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
have you done any? Sorry.
Oh, you go.
Well, have you done any of that, or looked up, or could steer me towards how to test for milk urea nitrogen?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking I might contact Dan Huggins, that's his name, the consultant that approached us before and wanted us to take some samples. I might give him a call before the next meeting and try to organise like maybe monthly tests or something like that, like straight from the vat.
Yeah, and it'd be great if you could have like an average dung score versus the milk urea nitrogen, because they should be correlated. So and
it seems like the only time that we've got good dung scores is when they're eating lots of silage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting just to see where the dung score improves and things like that. But it's awkward, isn't it? Because you sort of got to wind them out incredibly slowly. We tend to really bounce the cows straight out when they're just beef cows, and just this is what you get. But it'd really chop into your production, how much milk you grew. But you'd have to wind it out slowly and see where the dung scores started to improve, and be looking at the grass recovery versus the dung scores versus the cell count versus the milk urea nitrogen, because they're all linked. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So very good. Any other thoughts, comments? I'll just get this. So so Spikey, it really doesn't matter. It's really as long as you can get the stock density. Some people struggle with stock density with horses, and I always get into trouble because they say shoot the horse. But the what I think it just needs to be that, you know, you get a feel for the pattern. And the pattern is really that as you increase recovery, stock density, and utilization, that you get higher landscape function. So I wouldn't worry about the 9 months. You know, like it's always an awkward one when you have sort of not units and stuff like that. But yeah, 9 months is sort of what David Johnson and I've forgotten her name, so Johnson Sue compost couple. They found that all the diversity goes up in the compost, and I've been asking them, can they check litter that's out at the same, and they don't see diversity really jump in that non-aerated, aerated static compost, not turned until it gets to about 9 months old. So, and then it just goes berserk. So I'm assuming it's the same, but 12 months lets you see the pattern. You're not looking for an answer. You're looking for a trend and a pattern and say, okay, I'm going to be out there. Yeah, I think the hobbies are really Kirsten, are really a big issue. If you can't get in front of them, we've been getting in front of them in a lot of the areas. So they only have their lawns, hoppy lawns or marsupial lawns, in little patches, whereas the majority of the place gets away from them, and then they don't like being on it. But yeah, it's pretty. Some properties, they just eat like celias out of house and home. When they get going. So the only time that the grass got in front of them tended to be in spring. So Celia and I always talked about, well, did that mean you only grazed over late spring, summer? So almost like a fire break, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think I think it's an issue. I think we're losing control of some of these things. So in Tassie, the wallabies, and in Victoria, we're getting deer. Not many wallabies down here, deer and kangaroo. So I've seen them on the ring road around Melbourne as roadkill. You sort of go, well, they're starting to move in a lot. So yeah, so I think it is, but fencing them out's very expensive. Marshall just went ahead and did it, and so like he spent he liked his grass and stuff too much, so he's done a lot of it. So, but yeah, it is a challenge. But basically, you've got to have your grass older than the neighbours so that they shift to the neighbours. Which is always quite hard to do, and maybe not all that sort of neighbourly. So, Trevor Banks rang me up during the week, and both Trevor and I, and maybe others, know Nigel Kieran. So Nigel's a farmer and does some consulting around sort of central west New South Wales. He's been down to Victoria a few times and things like that. But he's got this this Optiway that's getting weights on the animals, and he's starting to see that longer recoveries equals higher weight gains. They're not the sort of recoveries that I would talk about, but he's actually noticing that the animals, he thought it was nutrient density, but I think it'd probably be low enough protein, true amino acids in the grass, and enough fiber for them to ruminate on. Problem is, we sort of try and run them like monogastrics, like pigs, and they really need to be ruminants. Well, they are ruminants, and a rumen needs sort of fiber to operate properly. So in Andre Voisin's book, Grass Productivity, in there, it stuck with me that on the dairy farms in France, they had to give them fiber because they couldn't ruminate. They didn't have anything to ruminate on because the grass was too young. So he wound out the age of the perennial grass. So he was sort of one of the original influences on Alan Savory. I thought it was a great book. So grass productivity. So this was back in the 40s, 50s. He did all his work and stuff, and he did it on dairy farms and things like that. So, but yeah, I just thought that was interesting because Nigel and I used to argue quite a bit about recovery. So he used to think all my recoveries were far too long, but now I've really liked it that Trevor rang and said about how, you know, he's now talking about that it was getting more data that was allowing him to see that he needed to increase the recovery. So I'll try and pull these, well, I will pull these out so that you can watch them if you want. They're just short little, you know, little grabs sort of what's that. And the other one was this woman in the USA. I've forgotten what state she's in Minnesota or somewhere, but she's doing the ultra high stock density. It's on a cover crop, from memory, but she's doing the trials. She's talking about dung scores and gut fill, safe to fail trials, dung scores, gut fills, and sort of very high stock density and stuff, and just experimenting with it, which I thought was fantastic because it sort of there's very little of that goes on in the USA. People are starting to move, and they're starting to argue with me about what is the safe to fail trial and all that sort of stuff. So some of the other forums and things like that on it's causing them some stress. But yeah, so she's stuck. I'll clip that out so that you can see that one as well. So, and then I'll just finish off. If any questions, it'd be great. Sort of got 5 minutes or so. So this is a Bonsmara, you know, following young Bonsmas breeding in South Africa. Very, very high price bull. And what Johan Zeitsman's pointing out, that if you select for feed conversion efficiency, which most animals are being selected on, is that how much kilograms of feed to kilograms of gain. What happens is that you select for lean meat because fat's got more energy in it. So you're picking animals, you're ending up with animals that are too lean. And I think that you see the same in the dairy industry. They've gone for a leaner genotype because they've selected for milk and and feed conversion efficiency and all this nonsense. And what it actually does is it selects an animal that only performs if it gets fed. So it's the opposite of where we need to go. There is no future in feeding animals bought in feed. We've got to go back to and I like this. Such a situation is not unique to the Bonsmara, but applies to all conventionally performance tested breeds. So, but then he talks about this bull that even on, that low octane, sort of very fibrous grass, half his daughters calve at 2 years of age. So they struggle to carve anything at 2 years of age, whereas we do it routinely in the southern areas. So, and he talks about this aggravated natural selection to get a genotype with is always in good condition, high practical fertility, whereas the scientifically selected, and he doesn't think it's science, it's sort of, they really do go on, sometimes not very kind and gentle with one another. But they do go on about sort of a lot of these older breeds that haven't been selected actually outperform. And the Nguni, which is another breed in Africa, actually outperforms the Bonsmara that's had all this focus on genetic gain and culling anything that didn't perform and all that sort of stuff. And all they've done is ended up with these animals that you've got to feed, probably with a double muscle gene as well. So, any comments, questions, thoughts? Anything burning? It's too hard, Matthew, was I on the dairy industry? Oh, can't get you. Can't, might be still on mute. It won't come on, it won't come
It's frozen,
through.
I think.
I can see you moving,
Yeah.
just can't hear you. So, yeah. What did you think? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you like picking on me, that's good. As in the dairy industry, we've been told what to do forever. And that's the thing with the 3-leaf stage grass. Well, we just can't, we got told we leave it at 3 or 2.5. We wasted food, but we're not wasting food. We're costing us a lot of money putting the fertiliser on, water on, and sick animals. So, yeah.
Well, otherwise, it's very good advice. So, yeah. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? I'll do a bit more just financials and any other thing that you'd like to discuss next week. I hope that was useful with that grass recovery. I can't remember how well I covered it the first time. But yeah, and if you want any more about that, yeah, thanks, Jordan. Very good.
Yep. Thank you, Graham. We learnt some more sciencey things tonight.
Yeah, oh good.
I like
try
that.
And weave a bit of that. I try and weave a bit of it in, but yeah, like so if send me an email or yell at me when we start the next time. Or could you just go back over that one? Do if it doesn't make sense when you get the notes. So I'll make sure I get them to Celia very promptly so that you get them quickly. So seeing she's only sitting around at AgFest, I'm sure she'll be. I found AgFest
Yes, you must all come and
exhausting.
see me at AgFest, the Tassie. So?
Yeah. I found AgFest exhausting. My back was aching, my legs were aching. Yeah. All righty.
Well, we're just
I'll
down
see
near
everyone.
the front gate on First Avenue. So I was just doing a plug for AgFest, Graham. For those Tassie people, we're down in First Avenue, 146.
I'll be there on Friday. I'll see you on Friday.
Please come and have a chat.
Fantastic.
Lovely.
Very good.
Right.
Okay, everyone.
Graham, we'll
see you next week.
About all that. That was good. And thanks for those people who sent in those photos too and the videos. That was great.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Really makes it.
Yeah.
So anything you can send in would be excellent. So okay. See you, everyone.
Thanks, Graham.
Thanks, Graham.
Bye.
See you.